Today, we'll be putting two of the most infamous graphics cards head to head in order to hopefully find out which one is the best, if you can say such a thing, that is. Alright, for the green team, we of course picked the GeForce 210 for its reputation on being an absolute shit card, and with 16 CUDA cores clocked at whopping half gigahertz, it certainly seems to live up to its title. Our card has 1GB of DDR3 VRAM, which is already too much for this card to handle. For its AMD competition, we have the Radeon HD 5450 with a generous helping of 80 shading units at a higher clock speed of 700 MHz. It sure does seem to be faster than the Nvidia card on paper, but will it be held back by its smaller VRAM size of only 512 MB? I guess we'll find this out in the benchmarks. Starting things off with Far Cry 3, the Radeon claimed a slight advantage over the Nvidia card, showing 8 FPS at the worst, 9.2 FPS most of the time, and almost 10 FPS at the best. Meanwhile, the GT210 scored slightly lower with a minimum FPS of 4, an average frame rate of 7.4, and a maximum frame rate of 8 FPS, the same as the minimum on the other card. In CounterStrike, both cards actually scored really similar to each other, with the differences only being in the percentage points. The GeForce only claimed a slight advantage in the maximum frame rate of scoring 88.9 FPS compared to the Radeon's 61 FPS, while the other ones were practically identical. Civ 5 is another game that favoured the Radeon card, which scored an average frame rate of 41.6, 20.5 FPS at the worst, and a maximum frame rate of 257 where it caught the loading screen, I think. The GeForce 210, however, on the other hand, did score an average frame rate of just under 30 FPS, a minimum frame rate that was slightly higher than the Radeon's, indicating a slightly more playable experience of 24.2 FPS and a maximum frame rate of 35.7. PUBG didn't run on the Nvidia card due to its lack of DirectX 11 support. However, it did run on the Radeon, where it scored an amazing result of 1.6 FPS at the minimum, an average of 5.6 FPS, and a maximum of 8.4 FPS. Now, couldn't you imagine your game being as playable as this? GTA 5 seemed to be the reversal of this, as it didn't seem to run on our Radeon card, but it did run on our Nvidia one, where it received a minimum result of 13.1 FPS, an average result of 16.9 FPS, and a maximum frame rate of 269.3 FPS in the in-game benchmark. In 7 Days to Die, the Radeon scored higher again, with an average frame rate of 7.5 FPS, a minimum frame rate of 5.4 FPS, and a maximum frame rate of 8.4 FPS. The Nvidia card scored slightly lower than average frame rate of 5.6 FPS, the minimum of 4.8 FPS, and a maximum frame rate of 6.9 FPS. The Radeon beat the Nvidia card again in our singular synthetic test, which is the user benchmark graphics test, where it scored 1.64% of an Nvidia 1070. The GeForce 210, however, scored slightly lower with a score of 1.57% of a 1070. So, as the benchmark showed, the Radeon did beat the 210, but for obvious reasons, I don't recommend either card. There are simply better options out there, such as any one on the Ryzen APUs, which not only perform better, but also free up a slot on your motherboard, which while not an issue on ATX systems, it is something to consider on ITX and other systems that are smaller. That's it for this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and tell us if we could improve something in the comments below.